record on this computer. All right, does it say recording on yours?
It does.
Okay, perfect. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, good evening, good night. EDG 7252, Group A. My name is Jonathan Higgins, and I'm coming to you live from St. Augustine, Florida. And
this is Tracey Long. I am coming live from Myrtle Beach. So we will begin the presentation here with Jonathan, and I will jump in accordingly.
All right. I'm going to share my screen so that we can all see what we're looking at here. We've got a Prezi to show you guys. Tracey, can you see the Prezi?
Yes.
Are you able to see that? Perfect. Okay. You can see Tracey's face still on the screen. I'm kind of in the background, but that's all right. So obviously this is the surf that Tracey is wishing she was on right now in Myrtle Beach. I don't know if any storms are blowing through there, but we'll move through that. If you can see my surfboards in the back, That
is Jonathan.
All right, so we are looking at curriculum standards and accountability this week. So we are going to go through a few of the influential thinkers here. So we look at Ralph Tyler, the father of educational evaluation and assessment, Jerome Bruner, the pivotal figure of the 1960s curriculum era. We're going to look at Diane Ravitch, A Nation at Risk, and kind of look at, how American schools are failing and how we can fix that. And last but not least, we will look at theories of codes of power and multicultural education and curriculum with Christine Sleater. So without further ado, we'll move into Ralph Tyler here. Ralph Tyler chaired the committee that developed the National Assessment of Educational Progress, which is related to the A Nation at Risk report. A little bit earlier there, but he here served on and advised the bodies that set guidelines for expenditures of federal funds and influenced the underlying policy of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965. Our group, it's funny, looking at our postings, Ralph Tyler was one that was, I don't want to say largely ignored, but I don't think he was nearly as influential, or at least we saw him not nearly as influential to our more contemporary educational reform and so forth with what we look at today. So I don't have many quotes for you from him. Tracey, do you want to chime in?
Yes, I really kind of didn't make a connection with him until I kind of pursued further reading, and that's how I realized that he was actually related and relevant to the Nation at Risk report because of the National Assessment of the Educational Progress, which was the data was used to develop that report. His curriculum is based on data gathered by objectives, which are focused on the learner, the home environment, and the subject matter. And he focuses his curriculum standards on 4 essential questions, which are: what are the purposes of the educational program? What experiences will further these purposes? How shall the program be organized? And how shall the program be evaluated?
Okay, very good. Thanks, Tracey. I can give you my 2 cents of what I got out of it. What I took away from Ralph Tyler here was looking at like STEM curriculum today, focusing on like student skills and abilities and so forth, and then also usefulness of curriculum. And I even acknowledged a lack of cursive handwriting in curriculum and so forth, at least in Florida today in early, in our elementary years, a lack of cursive, pushing things like that. So looking at things that simply have that utilitarian sense or that usefulness to them. All right, let's move on to our next contestant here, Jerome Bruner. Jerome Bruner served as a member of the educational panel of the President's Science Advisory Committee for the Nation at Risk report, and referencing his overall view that education should not focus merely on memorizing facts, knowing how something is put together is worth 1,000 facts about it. So really a deeper contextual meaning that we're looking for with Jerome Bruner, and further than his a course of study. Tracey, do you have anything you'd like to?
Yes, Bruner wanted to create an educational environment that would focus on essentially 3 things. What was uniquely human about human beings, how humans got that way, and how humans could become more so. He believed that children learn more effectively if they discover ideas for themselves rather than being told. He believed in children engaging in authentic intellectual activities at a very early age. And that children should focus on the structures of the discipline, how they're related, so that cross-curricular type of curriculum, and the transfer of training and knowledge was extremely important to him. And I did mention a few things, and even Jonathan called out in our responses about the ideals of cultural sensitivity and responsiveness, and the vague social studies curriculum. I think you mentioned that, Jonathan, in the course of study, MAN, that he had penned in, I think, '64 or something like that.
Yes, you know, and you're getting me right into where I want to be with the history standards here. You know, he specifically said that history is more than transmitting information, or more than just getting across information. So, you know, Tracey, I've actually got a quote from you from our discussion board here, in which you said, in developing a curriculum that cultivated a child's sense of connectedness, Bruno suggested children develop self-confidence, respect for self and others, self-awareness, respect for humanity, and a sense of inquiry and continuing their pursuit of knowledge and lifelong learning. So that really encapsulates his main purpose behind that, and going forward, making, again, history so much more, making literature so much more, and really teaching a cultural awareness of one another. So, all right. Next up, we have Diane Ravitch, and A Nation at Risk. This was highly publicized because it was commissioned by the U.S. Department of Education and told the story of the rise and impending fall of the educational system in the U.S. Our Nation at Risk are once unchallenged, sorry, this is covering the screen for me, unchallenged preeminence in commerce, industry, science, and technological innovation is being overtaken by competitors throughout the world. If an unfriendly foreign power had attempted to impose on America the mediocre educational performance that exists today, we might well have viewed it as an act of war. Tracey, I know you put this in here in the Prezi, but that was also in our discussion. That was a really powerful quote to me too, that stood out in looking at the crisis that's facing, that was facing America. And I know many of us talked about it, that it still is facing America because we have not settled these issues as of yet. Tracey, do you want to jump in there? And then I'll come back to some of the quotes from our class.
Yes, and that's, I think, one of the most important things with the Nation at Risk report is, excuse me, the impact is still being felt today. It emphasized the importance of education to the economic competitiveness in the global market. You know, and teachers at the time didn't feel like they should be responsible basically for the economy. So, you know, they felt attacked. And further reading, I did learn that those words were intentional. They wanted to get the attention of the American people. It was highly publicized, obviously, because it was commissioned by the U.S. Department of Education. You know, and it was also released in the midst of a recession. So when you compile all of that together, it obviously created kind of like this perfect storm. The accountability measures, you know, it still stressed that schools are accountable for higher performance, measured through standardized tests. And we questioned also, what is the federal government's role in education? Some of the recommendations that came out of that report was the focus on excellence, revamping the high school curriculum with fewer electives. The focus seemed to be on high school as opposed to the younger, more formidable years. And I think that was questioned by Tamia possibly, or Lindsay, in some of their responses was, you know, you kind of left out the children at a very young age where we can make an impact as well. Some of the assumptions that are still underlying today, and that report is over 35 years old. Again, it's going back to the accountability state standards movement, testing under the No Child Left Behind Act in math and reading. We neglect those untested areas, continued emphasis on the international economic competitiveness today. We have the standards for career and college readiness. One of the assumptions I felt was extremely important is it implicitly rejected the broader view that school performance is a result of both school and societal factors. They ignored the role of the external factors, and even though it was written to basically encourage us to all be more cognizant of the social injustices, especially of those disparate communities, we kind of ignored that. And that was probably the most important thing that came out of that report. And it was ignored, and I think it's being ignored today. So, And obviously, there's the issue with the states creating and developing their own standards as a result of that.
Well, Tracy, you just summed up our entire conversation on that one there. That was perfect. So when I look at the quotes, you literally drew on everything there, from, analyzing the student data and performance, of, gains made by Black and Hispanic students and compared to white students and so forth, and seeing that gap hasn't closed, that we haven't done enough to fix those problems. The problems with the type of data that we're looking at, Johnny had a quote on that, and making the connection then to our other class, EDG 6226, and the type of data, and this kind of storytelling, or counter storytelling. We also acknowledged the fact that, in the report, when looking at the literature standards, 77% of the authors were white. That's a big issue that still continues to happen. And Lindsay, questioned our test authors white as well, so that, and Tracy, you and I kind of talked earlier about the issue with like a national curriculum even, whose curriculum are we teaching? Whose history are we teaching? Whose literature and so forth? Let's see, any other quotes here? Yeah, Tamika said, it was very strange the commission did not think to look at the critical foundational ages of elementary and early childhood experiences to measuring learning achieved at those levels. So there's kind of lack of connection. I want to end with this quote from Johnny, or not really quote from Johnny, but we should actually end our entire presentation with this. But Johnny called for the idea to call for a longer school year with added flexibility to reach all learners. And while that's a powerful idea, I know those of you who are on summer break right now are cringing at Johnny and throwing stones as Tracy's in Myrtle Beach. But no, in all seriousness, we did have a really nice dialogue on that concept of how we could reach all learners if perhaps we had a longer school year or a modified school year and things like that. We'll move quickly because I know we're probably over time. We'll move quickly through now our last one. Let's see, this was the Stillman article. Correct? Am I correct there? Stillman article looking at Christine Slater.
Christine Slater, yes.
Yes. So, looking at their two pieces of culturally relevant teaching or equity, teaching or equity pedagogy, dialogue and relationships. Teachers can advance the learning of students of color through high academic expectations and genuinely believing in the students and not making assumptions for what they can do or can't do, can and can't do, and forming constructive working relationships with students and using dialogue to get to know them and their reality. So a lot on multicultural education here. Tracy, do you want to add?
The only thing I can really add, taking from the response, I think was from Lindsay, and she, not only with Slater, but she also mentioned Ravitch and examining the politics in their design and how that impacts education today. And it goes back to that multiculturalism. Yes.
I even referenced that, like a share or looking at, education being the means by which we share or control a society. When they look at, again, like you said, the politics of it, whose story are we telling? That history teacher in me jumps out, and screams when we talk about imperialism versus colonialism and things like that. And we call it colonialism because it sounds so much nicer, but no, this is imperialism. We're, stealing people's lands and people, let's not sugarcoat it here.
Yeah, Lindsay had mentioned, I believe also, about knowing students and how they learn. And she said, that is relevant data, but according to the others, it's not. They just want to look at the numbers and the numerical. And I just thought, she also mentioned about the elusive standards of objectivity and how the states hold the power to create those standards. And we referenced that as well earlier.
Yes. So as you can see here, all of these authors kind of tie together. If I can get back, all these authors tie together in their ideas on curriculum. Again, an emphasis on multicultural curriculum, an emphasis on who is creating those standards, who are creating those tests, whose curriculum are we teaching, whose history are we teaching, and so forth. I see ending this presentation looking to the future, or even an analysis of now. Where are we with Common Core and things like that? How has, I know Common Core is kind of on its way out, but how has Common Core had an impact? Has it been a continuation of No Child Left Behind, kind of just more assessment based and a failure to actually change curriculum? Or are we seeing a nation at risk and addressing those nation at risk issues? Where are we with SAT and ACT testing, even with colleges turning to SAT optional, test optional and things like that? Are we losing faith in some of those ideas or some of those tests? Or is there a deeper issue with our curriculum and assessment? So those are my questions to ponder, and I'll leave you with those. Tracey?
That's all. I think, like I said, we had some deep discussion on, several of those ideals, and that's how we kind of came up with the themes of basically the standards, the curriculum, and accountability. And across all of those readings and responses, those were evident.
Okay. All right. Well, I'd like to thank you all for joining us, however many times you'd like to see this and review this again. Tracey, it was very nice to finally meet you face to face.
Yes, you too, Jonathan.
And I look forward to working with you all soon. So, enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll see you guys in the project, working on the group project.
Great. See ya.
Right.
Bye-bye.
Bye. All right, Tracey, hang on. Let me end.